I'm not saying getting hypnotized caused Duck to waddle. He was called Duck for a reason, a good reason. What I am saying is that even after he was unhypnotized, he walked more like a duck than ever. Schultze hypnotized Duck shortly after Christmas vacation. He came back to the seminary with a pile of junk that he got off the back page of a comic book: X-ray specs, itching powder, a ventriloquist kit, and a pamphlet on how to hypnotize your friends. Schultze said he hypnotized his grandfather over the holiday and said it was easy. Well, we believed him. Mind you, Schultze was the smartest kid in the seminary, by far. We all assumed that brains accounted for that enormous head of his. And he wore super thick glasses. They looked like they came off the back of a comic book, too. He attracted wise guys as pals, guys who chafed at the seminary rules. He called them his rat pack, like Sinatra in the movies, like Ocean's 11 and Robin and the Seven Hoods, Frankie, Dino, Joey, Sammy, and Peter. Along with the gags, he brought back a box of chocolate X-Lax. And during studying hall one night, he convinced Bug-Eye Ernie that that they were regular chocolate squares, and he'd pay him $1 for each one he could catch in his mouth. It cost Schultze $5. But all night long, Ernie farted, flapped his sheets, and ran to the bathroom. In a dormitory filled with 50 teenage boys, that's entertainment. Duck's case was just as cruel. I'd say that Schultze had a lot of repressed anger and found its way to guys like Duck and Ernie, easy targets for cheap gags. Schultze and the Rat Pack convinced Duck to be hypnotized in the sports equipment room during recess one afternoon. And Duck, with those sleepy eyes, he was pliable. In no time, Schultze had Duck acting like a duck. He squatted and quacked and waddled into a stack of football helmets while the Rat Pack roared, and then a hula girl, a boxer, and finally Paul Revere. And that's when the bell rang. You see, bells ruled our lives. This bell said, "You got 15 minutes to get to chapel." Schultze must have rushed the end of his show because when he snapped his fingers, Duck's eyes opened wide. "The Redcoats are coming! The Redcoats are coming!" he shouted. Duck rushed out of the room and onto the sprawling, snow-covered campus. "The Redcoats are coming! The Redcoats are coming!" Schultze bolted out after Duck. "Stop!" he shouted. Duck froze in mid-stride like a statue. His arms raised, his mouth open, his eyes wide. Back in the room, Schultze could not break the trance. In desperation, he grabbed a baseball bat in one hand and Duck in the other. "It's morning," Schultze said, his face inches from Duck's. "When you hear the bell, you will wake up and forget that any of this happened." Schultze hit the radiator a couple times with the bat. Duck's eyes popped wide open. Like I said, bells ruled our lives. His head swiveled back and forth in panic. "What's going on? How did I get here?" "Long story," said Schultze with a grin. "It's time for chapel." At the chapel door, Duck pivoted toward the water fountain. As he bent over the cooler, the chimes above his head hit the hour. Duck collapsed onto the floor, sound asleep. Schultze reached up and hit the chimes. Duck woke up. Schultze hit the chimes again. Duck fell asleep. Schultze hit them one more time, and Duck woke up. The next time the chimes rang, Duck fell out of his study hall seat, sound asleep. The priest had Duck moved to the infirmary where there were no chimes, and a doctor gave him some sedatives, and several days later, he was back among the seminarians. That morning, Duck came into breakfast with the rest of us. The first time a bell rang, the entire student body froze as one. And Duck, he did not fall asleep. The entire student body exhaled. But Duck looked lost, confused, still bewildered. He had a glazed look. Maybe it was the Valium, but if you ask me, I'd say he was still hypnotized. And when he walked, Duck still waddled, Like I said, more than ever. Schulze's bags were packed and his parents picked him up the day before Duck was released from infirmary. Some guys got his comic book gags, others got his enormous stash of candy. The priest who taught science confiscated the hypnotism pamphlet. I got his contraband transistor radio with the little earplug. When it was spring and the nights were warm and the shades were raised and the tall dormitory windows were open to let in a little breeze, the lights of the city glowed on the horizon. The sounds of kids racing cars on flat and straight cornfield roads pierced the still air, and Petula Clark sang Downtown. The neon lights in my head, I'd pass the radio on to the next bed, and that guy, he'd pass it on down the line. And all night long, that radio made the rounds, like Radio Free America, opening eyes in a repressed country. When Schulze left, the rest of us kind of checked out too. The show was over, the ringmaster deposed. Becoming a priest seemed less enticing next to the Beatles and the Rolling Stones and teenage girls and neon lights from downtown. The Rat Pack all left the seminary at the end of that year. Sitting together as we waited for our rides to freedom, we roared out the lyrics to still another song that we had heard on the radio, the biggest hit of the day, from Eric Burden and the Animals. We gotta get out of this place. If it's the last thing we ever do, we gotta get out of this place, cause girl, there's a better life for me and you. One by one, parents pulled up in their cars, and one by one, they were gone, and nobody looked back.